Hi there, this is Stories for Sleep, and I'm Thumanis here to spend a quiet evening with you. A space where nothing needs to get done, where you can let the day go gently. Right now, just lie down as comfortably as you can. Let your hands rest beside you or gently over your belly. No need to adjust anything, just be. Take a slow breath in, hold it softly, then exhale easy and quiet. One more time. Inhale deeply. Feel the air cooling your chest and exhale like you're letting the day slip away. Now bring your attention to your forehead. If you're holding tension, let it go. Let your brow soften. Move down to your shoulders. Feel them sinking into the mattress. Relax your arms, hands, and fingertips. Let them feel light, like they're floating in warm water. Notice your chest and belly gently rising and falling, like a quiet boat rocking on still water. And now, know that there's nothing more you have to do. No one needs you to respond. No one is waiting. This moment is just for you and for a story told softly to help you rest. Whenever you're ready, we'll begin. A broken teacup, a hidden message, and a man who lost everything but his soul. Tonight, let me take you somewhere familiar. You've probably been there yourself, or maybe you're there right now. You wake up, open your laptop, scroll through unread emails, and somewhere between a meeting that could have been an email and a silence that feels heavier than words, something inside you just snaps. Maybe you're like Michael. Michael was 38, a regional director at a mid-size finance firm in downtown Chicago. On paper, his life looked clean, polished, white button-downs, custom shoes, a sleek apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows looking down over Walker Drive. But inside, it felt like he'd been holding his breath for years. Each day, the pressure mounted. The performance reviews, the silent expectations, the feeling of being surrounded by people who'd smile at you in meetings and ignore you in the elevator. He hadn't spoken to his father in 21 years, and he hadn't planned to until the letter arrived. No envelope, just a thin weathered sheet folded in half slipped under his door like some relic from another time. He almost mistook it for junk mail, but the handwriting stopped him. Old, barely legible, faint blue ink that trembled on each curve. It read, "Michael, if this finds you in time, I'm at the Tathagata Zen Monastery in Oregon. The doctors say I don't have much longer. I never got to say the things that mattered. If you want answers, this is where you'll find them. Not in me, but in what I left behind. Dad." He didn't feel rage, not yet. He felt nothing, like someone had reached inside and turned down the volume of his whole life. He tossed the letter on the counter, walked to the fridge, stared into the light, closed it again. His phone buzzed, meeting in 10, and then something strange happened. He walked over to the window, looked out, and whispered to no one. Why now? Let me ask you something. Have you ever had a moment like that, where something old, something unresolved comes knocking when you least expect it? If that sounds like you, maybe take a moment adjust your pillow, let your shoulders fall, and if you're listening somewhere late at night, drop a quick comment and let me know. Where are you tuning in from tonight and what time is it there? You're not alone. Now take a deep breath with me, and as you exhale, imagine for a moment someone you once hated reaching out, asking you to come. Would you go? This is how Michael's journey began. Not with a bang, but with an invitation soaked in silence. He didn't answer the letter, not that day. He buried it under a pile of unopened bills and quarterly reports. But like all things unresolved, it didn't stay buried for long. Because fate has a way of circling back. And just 3 days later, while standing in a glass-walled boardroom, 15 stories up, Michael would learn that everything he built was about to come crashing down. But that comes next. 3 days after that letter arrived, Michael stood in a conference room made of glass. The sky outside was grey. The kind of grey that seeps into everything. Your inbox, your coffee, your bones. The meeting had been called last minute. Executive review. The subject line had read. That in itself wasn't unusual. But the way the room felt, that was. He stood at the head of the table, hands resting on a thick leather folder. Across from him sat James Conroy, sleek younger, the kind of man who always managed to smile without ever really smiling. A VP from New York headquarters. HR was here too. And someone from legal. Michael's boss, Tom, wasn't. He glanced at the clock. 9:04 a.m. The room smelled like cinnamon from someone's pastry. But under it, there was something else, a tension so sharp you could smell it. Then James leaned forward and said the words. Michael, we've reviewed the client acquisition reports from Q2, and there are discrepancies that require internal investigation. Michael blinked. Excuse me? James adjusted his cufflinks. It appears that under your leadership, client transitions were mishandled, and several key partners are now alleging ethical breaches. Michael laughed. A dry, disbelieving sound. You're kidding, right? I personally oversaw every one of those transfers. We hit target 3 weeks ahead. Ask Tom. Tom is on leave. Since when? As of this morning. That's when it hit him. Not the report, not the language, not even the empty eyes around the table. It was the silence. The kind of silence that only shows up when everyone in the room has rehearsed what they're going to say and decided not to tell you. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Across the glass in the reflection, he saw himself tied in perfect eyes burning. And behind him, the skyline. Chicago in all its cold steel arrogance. He'd given this city everything. They told him to step down, pending review. It wasn't a termination yet, but the message was clear. Someone had pushed the knife in, and someone else had twisted it. He walked out of the room without a word. Elevator down, through the marble lobby, out onto the wet pavement. The rain had started. He didn't run. He didn't call a lawyer. He didn't even go home. Instead, he walked for hours from the Loop to Lincoln Park, past cafes cafes where people laughed too loudly, past children crying, cars honking, an old woman feeding pigeons beneath a broken umbrella. It wasn't until 6 p.m. that he finally turned his phone back on. 12 missed calls. 2 voicemails from the firm's legal department. 1 text from Ella. "I'm sorry. I'm not strong enough to stay. Please don't make this harder." He stared at the screen. Then again. Then again. Ella, the only person who knew about the nightmares, who held him after those long, voiceless nights, who'd stayed when he lost his mom 3 years ago. She was gone, and she hadn't even said it to his face. When he got home, the apartment was quiet. Half the furniture was gone. The bookshelf empty. The paintings gone. Her mug, the one with the blue handle and the chip near the rim, gone too. But the envelope was still there. That damn envelope. The letter from his father, now coffee-stained and crumpled, sitting right where he'd left it. He picked it up, and this time, he read it again. Not just the words, but the white space between them. "If you want answers, this is where you'll find them. Not in me, but in what I left behind." Michael sat on the edge of his bed, still in his suit, still soaked. He looked at his hands. They were shaking, not from cold, but from everything breaking at once. The loss of power, the loss of control, the unbearable silence of knowing he had no one left to blame, not even himself. He didn't cry, he didn't scream, but in that stillness, something cracked, not loudly, not violently, like a hairline fracture in stone. Quiet, but irreversible. And somewhere in that fracture, a thought emerged. Not fully formed, not even rational, just a whisper. Go. Not because he forgave his father, not because he believed in monasteries or letters or closure, but because suddenly he had nowhere else left to go. And so the next morning, without a plan, without telling anyone, without forwarding his mail, Michael bought a one-way ticket to Oregon. He packed a duffel bag, tucked the letter inside, and left the only city he'd ever known. Not to find peace, not yet, but to confront a ghost, and perhaps to bury one. Michael never liked flying. It wasn't the turbulence. It was the waiting, the stillness. The feeling of being suspended mid-air, unable to do anything. Kind of like his life right now. He sat by the window of seat 14A, watching the clouds shift beneath the wing. On his tray table was an unopened manila folder. Inside, email printouts, legal contacts and screenshots. Evidence. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to take down Conroy. Enough to drag the firm into a reputational scandal. Enough to make people squirm the way they'd made him squirm. That folder had weight, not just physical, but emotional. It felt hot, like something alive. He kept his fingers pressed to it, the way a gambler holds chips before pushing them all in. But beneath all of that, there was another weight, the letter. He'd folded it small, tucked it in his wallet, next to his old staff ID badge. He hadn't told anyone where he was going. Not his assistant, not HR, not even Ella, though her number still lived in his contacts under the name Always. He told himself the trip was strategic, that he needed to understand why his father had reached out after all these years. He told himself he wasn't chasing healing. He was chasing leverage. Because if there was one thing Michael knew how to do, it was stay in control. Control the narrative. Control the numbers. Control the damage. But something in him knew this wouldn't be like that. The plane landed in Portland just past sunset. The sky was the kind of bruised purple you only see in the Pacific Northwest, like a memory trying to fade but refusing to. Michael rented a beat-up silver Toyota and began the 3-hour drive south toward the hills. The monastery wasn't listed on any GPS, just a pin drop sent via email by the monk named Kenji, who'd replied to Michael's one-sentence inquiry the night before. "We've been expecting you. Room 7 is ready." That was it. No last name, no ceremony, just an open door. He arrived close to midnight. The road had turned from asphalt to gravel to something that barely resembled a road at all. Trees loomed tall on either side, their silhouettes moving like slow giants in the wind. At the end of a long, winding path stood a gate, old wooden simple. Above it, carved into the beam, were 4 weather-worn characters, Rushujujian, to see things as they truly are. He stood there a moment, car still humming behind him. The place looked untouched, as if time hadn't dared come here. He killed the engine, grabbed his bag, took one long breath of pine heavy air, then pushed open the gate. A bell rang softly somewhere in the distance, not loud, just enough to say, "Someone knows you're here." He crossed a small courtyard lit by paper lanterns, each flickering gently like breath. On the far side, a man waited, tall, white-bearded, wrapped in a dark brown robe, hands clasped before him. "You're Michael," the man said, no question in his tone. "I'm Kenji." Michael nodded. There was a pause, not awkward, just quiet. Kenji tilted his head. "You've had a long day. Room 7 is through there. Breakfast is at 6. You're welcome to join, or not." He turned and walked away. Just like that. No speech, no welcome packet, no lectures on enlightenment. Michael stood alone again. The wind rustled. Somewhere behind him, a small gong sounded. Not for him, for the hour. He found room 7. It was Spartan mattress on a raised wooden platform, a clay water jug, a single lantern. On the nightstand, there was a ceramic cup, glazed but chipped. No note, no explanation. He stared at it a long while, then placed the folder on the floor beside the bed. The letter stayed in his hand. That night, Michael didn't sleep. Not because of noise, but because silence can be its own kind of violence when you've been running from it too long. He lay there, thinking of things he hadn't thought about in years. The way his dad used to polish his shoes every Sunday before church. The last time they spoke, shouting in the driveway, 17 years old, fists clenched, tears swallowed. The silence after. By morning, he hadn't touched the folder. But something had shifted. He still wanted answers, still carried fire, still felt that need to hold someone accountable. But now there was something else beneath the anger. A question. Not how could you, but what if I never really knew him at all? And that question was enough to keep him there. Just one more day, maybe two. Michael woke to the sound of sweeping. A soft, rhythmic brush against stone. Not urgent, not performative, just present. He sat up slowly. The light coming through the paper window was that early morning kind. The kind that doesn't ask anything of you. Room 7 was colder than it looked. He pulled the blanket tighter around his shoulders and sat for a moment, watching dust drift lazily in the sunbeam. The folder still sat unopened by the bed. The ceramic cup remained untouched on the table. He didn't know what time it was, but something told him he was already late. Outside, the air was sharp with pine and damp moss. He followed the scent of something warm, rice miso, to a small dining hall. Simple wooden tables, shoji screens, 4 or 5 monks in brown robes eating in silence. No one looked up when he entered. No introductions. No, come sit with us. Just bowls, steam, quiet. He grabbed a tray and sat in the corner. Ate slowly. It had been years since he'd eaten something so plain. No sauces, no sides, just food. Real. Enough. As he placed his chopsticks down, someone sat beside him. It was Kenji. No robe this time, just a grey wool sweater over loose pants. His hair was pulled back and he smelled faintly of sandalwood. "How do you sleep?" he asked. Michael shrugged. Didn't. Kenji nodded like that was the right answer. "You planning to stay long?" Michael paused. "I haven't decided." "That's okay. Most of us didn't at first." He sipped from his cup, then turned slightly. "Your father and I sat at this table almost every morning for 6 years." Michael stiffened. He hadn't expected that. "You knew him well." Kenji didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied Michael's face not with scrutiny, but with recognition, as if remembering something from far away. "We fought a lot, he and I, usually about things that didn't matter, sometimes about things that did." Michael waited. "He didn't say much about you, but when he did, his eyes changed, like someone trying to remember the lyrics to a song they used to know by heart." Michael swallowed. He didn't want to ask the next question, but it came out anyway. "Was he a good man?" Kenji smiled. Not kindly, but knowingly. "That's not a real question, is it?" Later that morning, Kenji found him in the garden. He was pretending to look at the pond, but really he was hiding from whatever the hell this place was waking up inside him. Kenji handed him a broom. "Rake the gravel, follow the lines, then destroy them. Do it again." Michael blinked. "What Zen gardening? It's not for the garden." And then he walked off. The first hour was awkward. Michael had no idea what he was doing. The rake snagged on pebbles. His lines were crooked. Every time he stepped back to admire a pattern, he saw his own footprints had ruined it. The second hour, he stopped trying. Just followed the rake, watched it move, watched thoughts pass like leaves on a stream. A fight from college, a meeting with HR, Ella's half-packed suitcase, his dad's last voicemail, a memory of cereal on a Sunday morning. By noon, the pattern in the gravel was the best it had been. And then, he erased it. Just like Kenji said. And strangely, it felt good. That evening, he helped in the kitchen, washing rice, slicing daikon, stoking the fire under the old copper pot. Kenji stood nearby slicing tofu with the precision of a surgeon. "You think you came here to learn something," he said, out of nowhere. "But really, you came to unlearn." Michael looked over. Unlearn what Kenji didn't look up. The idea that your pain makes you special. Michael felt the heat in his face before he felt it in his chest. "You don't know me," he said, sharper than he meant. Kenji smiled. "That's true, but I've met 1,000 men who carry anger like armor, and every single one of them thought they were the only one." Silence. "Then your father was like that too, for a long time." That night, Michael couldn't sleep again. Not because of the silence, but because of what the silence was starting to reveal. He sat up, lit the lantern. The room glowed dim gold. On the table, the ceramic cup sat quietly, still chipped, still there. He picked it up and turned it in his hand. On the bottom, something was scratched faintly into the clay, already broken. He stared at it. It didn't make sense. And yet, it made too much sense. The next morning, Kenji met him by the steps outside room 7. Michael didn't speak, just handed him the manila folder. Kenji took it gently, didn't open it. "What do you want me to do with this?" Michael shrugged. "Burn it. Keep it. I don't care." Kenji nodded. "Then we'll make tea instead." They sat together that afternoon in silence, sipping tea from chipped cups, watching the wind bend the grass just enough to remind them they were still breathing. And for the first time in a very long time, Michael didn't feel like anything was missing. He still had questions, still carried regret, but it no longer felt urgent, just present. And that was enough. For now. It rained the next morning, the kind of soft, soaking rain that seeps into wood and memory alike. Michael stayed inside the meditation hall longer than usual, not meditating exactly, just sitting, watching the way the drops collected on the edge of the window frame, then finally surrendered to gravity. Kenji had gone silent again, like he knew something was coming, and he was right. After lunch, a younger monk approached Michael in the hallway. He bowed, handed over a small envelope and said only, "This was left for you. Your father gave it to us before he passed." The envelope was old, yellowed, the seal barely holding. Written on the front in the same trembling hand as the letter, "For Michael, after I'm gone, Michael stared at it a long while. Then without a word, he walked across the grounds toward the room where his father had stayed. Room 11. He had passed it every day since arriving, had never dared open the door. Now, he did. The room was empty. Not in the way rooms are when people pack and leave, but empty in the way forests are quiet after snowfall, clean, uncluttered. A single tatami mat, a folded blanket, a low shelf with one worn book, the Dhammapada. On the windowsill sat a small wooden box. Michael crossed the room slowly, sat down beside it, the envelope still in his hand. He opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a key. The paper read, "Dear son, I know I do not deserve your presence here. I know what I abandoned, what I ran from. But please believe this, I did not come here to disappear. I came here to learn how to see again. I left nothing behind except this box. If you choose to open it, you'll understand why. And if you choose not to, I still love you. Dad." Michael sat still. The weight of 20 years of silence now pressed into a single moment. A breath, a choice. He looked at the box. Old oak, worn edges, a tiny keyhole on the front. His hands moved before his thoughts could catch up. The key turned with a soft click. Inside was nothing. Or at least, that's what it looked like at first. Then he saw it. A single photograph, faded, curling at the edges, taken decades ago. It was of him, Michael, age 7, standing at the edge of a lake, holding a kite, and behind him, his father, smiling. Not the forced social kind of smile, a real one, wide, full of wind and joy. They were both soaked like it had just rained. Michael stared at it for a long, long time. Behind the photo at the very bottom of the box was a second slip of paper, short, almost like a koan. "The cup is already broken." That phrase again. He didn't understand, didn't want to understand. He shoved the box away, stood up too fast. His chest was tight, his throat burned. "That's it," he whispered. "That's all you left me." No apology, no answers, no explanation for why he walked away, for why he disappeared for 2 decades, for missing graduation, the wedding, the funeral. "You left me nothing." He stormed out. It wasn't until nightfall that he returned. Rain still fell, light, relentless. He entered room 7, hands muddy, shoes soaked. He slammed the door, saw the cup on the table, the same ceramic cup, the one with the chip. He picked it up hard, too hard, and it slipped. It shattered on the floor in 3 pieces. Michael stared at it, breathing fast, fists clenched. But then, he dropped to his knees, and something inside him broke too. Not like the cup, more like a dam. A tightness in his chest gave way to something he hadn't allowed himself in years. He cried, not out of rage, not even grief, but release. When the sobs faded, he noticed something. Etched faintly on the inside of the largest broken piece, barely visible, were the words "already broken," not painted, carved, as if someone had known, as if someone had meant for this to happen, as if his father had left him this, not to keep whole, but to break, so that he could finally understand. Michael sat there a long time, then slowly gathered the pieces, placed them gently back on the table. Didn't try to fix it, didn't need to. Some things are beautiful because they are broken, not despite it. Later that night, he walked to Kenji's quarters. The old monk was seated in silence folding linens. Michael didn't say anything. He just held out the photo. Kenji looked, smiled faintly. He loved that day, Kenji said softly. He talked about it often, but only after year 4. Before that, he didn't say much at all. Michael looked down. Why did he never come back? Kenji folded another sheet because he thought he didn't deserve to. That's not an answer. No, Kenji said. It's not. They sat together in the quiet. Then Kenji poured tea. 2 chipped cups. As always, Michael didn't speak to anyone for 2 days. He didn't rake the garden, didn't help in the kitchen, didn't show up to morning tea or the evening sit. He spent his hours walking the grounds, circling the same path over and over past the moss-covered stones, the wind-bent pines, the stream that curved gently behind the zendo. Sometimes he held the photo, sometimes he didn't, but he always carried the folder, still unopened, still full of the things he'd planned to use as a weapon. By the 3rd evening, the weight of it became unbearable, not just because of what was inside, but because of what it represented. The old version of him, the man who needed to be right, who needed revenge to feel like justice, who needed someone to answer for everything he'd lost. But now, he wasn't sure that man still existed. That night, just after dusk, Michael walked to the fire pit. The air was cool, heavy, with pine and the scent of burnt cedar. He crouched down, opened the folder. Every page inside was crisp, methodical damning. There were email trails, voicemail transcripts, printed out memos, notes he'd scribbled in red ink during a sleepless night 2 weeks before the boardroom meeting. He read them slowly. Each word now felt distant, like reading someone else's rage. He paused when he got to the last page. It was a printed screenshot of a Slack message from James Conroy. A single line. He won't see it coming. Michael stared at it. Then, without ceremony, he fed it to the flame. He watched as the paper curled, blackened, and vanished. Then the next, and the next, until nothing remained but smoke, ash, and heat. The folder was gone. The plan was gone. And strangely, he felt lighter. Not triumphant, but cleared out. Like he'd finally made room for something else. The next morning, Kenji found him by the bell tower sipping tea from a newly cracked cup. Michael looked up as the old monk approached. "I burned it," he said simply. Kenji nodded, unsurprised. what did you keep?" Michael held up the photo. "This." Kenji smiled. "Good choice." They stood in silence a moment. Then Michael asked, "Why the cup? Why write already broken on something you knew I'd drop?" Kenji sat beside him. "Because your father wanted you to understand that love is not what stays whole. It's what still matters after everything falls apart." Michael stared at the distant trees. He should have said that. Kenji shrugged. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe he didn't know how. Kenji looked at him. Or maybe he was hoping you'd come and figure it out for yourself. Michael didn't reply, but in that silence something settled. That afternoon, Michael returned to room 11. Not to stay, just to sit. The room still smelled faintly of cedar and paper and rain. On the shelf sat the Dhammapada, still closed. This time he opened it. Inside the front cover was a note written in faded pencil. "True inheritance is not land or name, but the courage to forgive without permission." He ran his fingers over the words, then gently closed the book and placed it back. That evening, during the last meal before his departure, the monks gathered around the courtyard table. The conversation was minimal as always, but there was a presence, a quiet acknowledgement. Kenji sat beside him, serving rice with a worn ladle. Michael leaned in. "You ever think of leaving this place?" he asked. Kenji smiled. "Sometimes. But then I realize I never really came here to stay. I came here to remember. And now I just keep remembering." Michael looked down at his bowl. "And what do you remember the most?" Kenji turned his eyes toward the hills. "That everything is always leaving, but some things return." The next morning, Michael packed lightly. Just the photo, a copy of the Dhammapada, a gift from the library, and a small ceramic chip from the broken cup. He placed it in his wallet next to the letter. On his way out, he paused at the gate. He looked up once more at the wooden beam overhead, to see things as they truly are. And this time, he understood. He didn't need to stay to carry this place with him. He didn't need to punish the world to feel whole. He didn't need anyone to say sorry. He had already said it to himself. And for the first time in years, he felt ready. 6 months later, a small tea shop opened on the quieter end of Ashland Avenue, just past the train overpass. There was no grand opening, no social media launch, no ribbon-cutting ceremony, just a hand-painted wooden sign above the door, "Empty cup." The shop was narrow but warm. Pale wood floors, earth-toned cushions, no Wi-Fi, no espresso machines, just tea, poured slowly, served in chipped ceramic cups. At the back of the shop, behind the low counter, Michael moved calmly, steeping leaves, folding napkins, arranging small bowls of sesame biscuits beside quiet bowls of matcha. He didn't rush. He didn't check his phone every 10 minutes. Sometimes, when customers stayed longer than expected, staring blankly out the window, or quietly weeping into their sleeve over something they didn't explain, he said nothing. He simply poured more tea and sat with them. Not to fix, not to advise, just to be there. that was enough. Every morning before unlocking the shop, he would take a short walk to the park nearby. He didn't bring earbuds, didn't jog. He just walked. Listened to the crunch of gravel under his shoes, watched the birds tracing invisible arcs across the sky. Sometimes he'd whisper, "The cup is already broken," not as a warning, but as a reminder to love what he held before it was gone, to see the sacred in the ordinary, to let go without needing a reason. One rainy Thursday around closing time, a woman walked in. She was wrapped in a navy coat, hair damp, makeup smudged. She didn't say much, just ordered green tea and sat near the window. When Michael brought it over, she looked up, and for a second, just a second, he froze. Ella. She looked older, softer, more tired than he remembered. But it was her. Their eyes met. She didn't say, "I'm sorry." He didn't ask, "Why did you leave?" He just set the cup down gently. She touched the rim. "It's chipped," she said, half smiling. He smiled back. "Still holds tea." She stayed for an hour, maybe more. They didn't talk about the past. They didn't talk much at all. When she left, she paused at the door. "This place feels safe," she said. Michael nodded. So did the silence. She blinked, almost cried, then nodded once and stepped back into the rain. He didn't watch her go. That night before closing, he sat alone near the window, looking out into the streetlight rain. In front of him, a chipped cup, steam curling softly. In his wallet, the old photo now laminated. Next to it, the ceramic shard from room 7. Both still with him, but no longer needed to prove anything. Not to others, not even to himself. He had come to understand something important. That peace doesn't arrive with fanfare or fireworks. It doesn't come wrapped in closure or tied with answers. It comes quietly. Sometimes it just sits beside you, in a garden, in a tea shop, in your own skin, and says, "You're allowed to stop fighting now." If you're still here, still listening, maybe this is your moment too. Maybe you've been holding something too long. A grudge, a memory, a version of yourself that doesn't fit anymore. Maybe you've been waiting for someone to say sorry, waiting for a clean ending, for a last word, a right time. But what if I told you, you don't need any of that? You can stop here, right now, and just breathe, not to forget, but to remember that the cup was always already broken, and you were always whole, even in the quiet, even in the dark, even when no one saw you, especially then. So tonight, as you lay down, let the past walk itself out quietly. You don't need to follow it. Let your body soften. Let your breath deepen. Let your hands unclench. You've carried enough. You've tried hard enough. And now it's time to rest. Like a monk in an empty room. Like rain on cedar wood. Like tea poured slowly. into a chipped but worthy cup. Good night, and thank you for staying with the story. May you sleep deeply and wake gently to a world that's been waiting for you, just as you are. At its heart, this story is about letting go of the need for closure and choosing peace over proof. Michael spent most of his life carrying the weight of betrayal, abandonment, and unanswered questions. He believed that justice would come from confrontation, from exposing the truth, from making someone else pay. But what he discovered through silence, stillness, and unexpected grace was that real healing doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from giving ourselves permission to stop fighting. For many of us, especially in the second half of life, the scars run deep. Some wounds never got their apology. Some relationships were never mended. And the world as we knew it changed too fast to make sense of. But we are not broken because of these things, we are wise because of them. And the greatest freedom we can offer ourselves now is to lay it all down, to be present, to breathe, to accept that what's gone is gone and what remains is enough. So if this story resonated with you, let it be your invitation to loosen your grip, to stop waiting for the perfect moment to heal. Maybe that moment is now. And if you're still here with me, consider subscribing to the channel or leaving a comment below. Just let me know where you're listening from or what part of Michael's journey spoke to your own. Until next time, may your heart feel lighter, your sleep be deeper, and your cup, however chipped, stay full.